And then, of course, our experts will be answering questions out in the comments as well. So here we go. We're going to get started officially. Are you ready? Hi, I'm Mia Voss. You're here at J Good Village, a free community where we teach anyone the basics of how to travel anywhere in the world for free. We have these seminars weekly that are jam-packed with information. So, of course, we have our two experts, Stephanie and Thomas, that are here with us that are going to talk about that. So I'm going to mute myself and let you two have at it. It's going to be fun. Take some notes, y'all.
Awesome. Thanks, Mia. Yeah, we're here to talk about redemption multipliers, which I feel like is a huge topic that honestly an hour doesn't even do it justice, but we're going to try and get through as much as we can. But I feel like this is where a lot of other programs or guides or materials kind of leave off at this part of like, okay, you've learned how to collect points. You've learned how to get all the right credit cards. And now you're actually trying to use them on a flight. Now what? Like that's kind of where we're picking up and kind of helping out too for people who have been trying to use their points efficiently, but are just struggling to get the really cool redemptions that you see us kind of bragging about and posting about in the village all the time. Yeah,
I have this image of somebody just standing there with all these like big kind of game coins going, now what do I do? Right?
What do I do with them? Yeah.
So that's like the number one question I think we get at like Checkpoint 5 or in the lounge, which is a different program, but is all these people saying, well, I figured out how to earn points, but now like, how do I get all these deals? Because I'm seeing flights for 1 million points and we're like, don't spend 1 million points on a flight. So this is definitely like condense some of that because you see it's missing from a lot of the big blogs, big programs out there. There's earn points and then pictures of people redeeming stuff. And it's like, well, there's a lot in the middle there that no one really covers. So that's why we thought we'd put this together.
Yep.
And we're going to do some what not to do's because there's a lot of wrong ways, as Thomas just mentioned, for you to use your points where you're getting, it's almost a waste.
Yep. We'll see that in here too. All right, but let's dive in because it's definitely a big topic for just an hour's time. So, all righty, that's us. There's me and Tom. Surprisingly, this was not taken at the same location. We weren't actually sitting across the table from each other. I just thought it was really awesome that we picked these photos because it looks like we are. And I think we were both in the south of France for these. But yeah, that's us. Yeah, so I'm the Southwest Airlines expert, and I also do tons of award searching. I am the person behind the screen when people submit flights that they're having trouble with that they want me to look up through our points research program. I'm the one who does that. And then Tom in the lounge is one of our coaches who does who teaches people how to redeem their points and also a huge aviation nerd. If I left anything out, Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, huge aviation nerd, love traveling, love history, which doesn't really help with point redemption, but people I talk about it enough. And then I also do some of the privé, some of the hotel side of things as well. But yeah, we're both, it's interesting. I always tell people to make sure they go to both me and Stephanie's class. So it's similar material, but different perspectives on both. And by going to both, you can really get the best of both worlds and figure out how to get the best redemptions.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to pop this in here. What they're talking about is the lounge. That's, as Thomas mentioned, a completely different program, but that is where you really get a lot of these pretty fancy, pretty amazing trips and take it to the next level with all that. So if you're interested in that, you can go to jgood.com/call and set up a call. We'll see if it's a fit for all of us.
Awesome. All right. I'm going to get through this pretty quick because I want to get to the good stuff. But yeah, how I'm, I guess, credible to talk about this topic. I have taken 47 flights so far this year, flew 74,000 miles last year. My most flown plane is actually a Boeing 737 MAX 8, which surprises some people. It's not a wide body plane. Like my most common plane flown is actually a Southwest plane. Because even though I know how to use my miles to book some really amazing things, most of my trips are domestic. And then I have like my 3 or 4 big business class kind of hops across the pond and stuff. So that might surprise some people. I have 8 credit cards in my wallet, not a big credit card churner, but I have about 2 or 3 that I use regularly. And then I've definitely earned over $100,000 in free travel. I just kind of stopped counting after that because it's too much. Here you go, Tom.
Yeah, that's me. I still think it's hilarious. We were both in the south of France drinking wine. Um, I've been to 100 countries. I was lucky that I worked in defense for a little bit and work travel to some kind of areas you don't typically go for tourism. So I love exploring those areas. 1.2 million miles since 2016, according to my TripIt Pro calculation, which is circumnavigating the globe a few times. 2 million points. After a while, it's hard to tell how much you've earned and spent. I'm a credit card minimalist, so I only really have 4 credit cards that I use, and I probably only really use 2 of them regularly. I like having a small, simple wallet and not having too much. And it's proof that you don't need to open a new credit card every month to get good redemptions on these things. I fell in love with aviation when I was about 11. I remember it was a Boeing 747. They used to fly those between Boston and Orlando before narrow bodies got more efficient. And I remember being on, and the Irish World Cup team was on, and I got to go hang out with them in first class. And I was like, this is magical. Like, and I just fell in love with it ever since. And also my wife's from Thailand, so I spent a lot of time in Thailand. So that's one of my sort of areas I know a lot about, and I've had to find a lot of good deals getting to Southeast Asia. So that's one of the areas I specialize in for redemption multipliers.
I love that you're both talking about your favorite planes. I mean, that's, they mean business. And I want to pop this comment in from our Brooke from above. I heard someone call it trying to learn Mandarin from a Chinese restaurant menu. It's hard, but Stephanie and Tom are here to help. So I love that comment. And Joel actually piped in and said that he has a similar pick, he and Michelle, at a street cafe in Portugal. So that is very much the Jay Goot way.
Oh, that's my favorite. I'm actually not surprised that we have similar photos, because that's like basically what I do when I go to Europe. That's where you can find me. Cool. All righty. So the first part that we want to go over for all of you is calculating the value of your points. So this is kind of how we determine if there's a redemption worth taking. And what we consider CPP is cents per point. So that's kind of like the rough way that we decide if it's worth using our points on a certain redemption or not. And how we calculate it. So we actually have a calculator. You can go to jgoot.com/calculator to find this spreadsheet here. You have to make a copy of it. You can go to File, Copy, to make your own copy that you can fill in the blanks and use. But you don't really have to know all the math behind it. You don't have to memorize anything. You honestly can just go to our calculator to figure out the value of your points and if it's worth using them on that redemption or not. And generally for, economy, domestic flights, you're probably only going to be in like the 1.5 to 2 cent range, and that's okay. For long haul economy, probably more in that 2 cent range. And then it's if you're doing like long haul business class and first class flights, that's really where you get into that 5 cents and above territory. So I want to make sure everyone's clear on that too, because some people think if they're not getting 5 cents per point on their flight to Florida, that it's a failure. And that's just not realistic. 2 cents for economy is really good and more than most people are getting. And actually, if you're transferring your points to airlines instead of booking in the Chase portal, you're doing better than probably 99.9% of travelers out there, because everyone's instinct is just to go through the Chase or the Amex portal and book their flights. Most people don't even know that there's another way. So if you've read the book and you're here and you're watching us on this live stream, you're already ahead of most people.
And don't feel badly, because they do make it easy for you to go and use those portals and point at places and use the points where you shouldn't be. So, and then what I love about this calculator too, as you can see, as Stephanie mentioned, you can download it, and it's at jgoot.com/calculator. It's very interactive. You can see where you're at. And then of course you've got this little chart that tells you how well you're doing. It's very fun and gamified.
Yeah.
With some fun language too.
Yeah. There's a little bit of fun language in there. How important is cents per point and when it's okay to redeem for less? Tom, do you want to give your inputs on the feel good rule? I know you have a really good take on this.
Yeah, definitely. This comes up a lot. We'll talk to people, and sometimes now cents per point is an amazing way to gauge, am I getting value for this? Does it make sense to do points versus cash? But sometimes there's the convenience factor, the easiness factor, the feel good rule, we kind of call it. And that sometimes it's okay if you're getting less than 5 cents per point, but it's leaving from the airport you want, getting to the airport, the schedule works out, it's a nicer airplane. It's an aspirational product. I'm guilty of that, where I'll pay a little bit more to get the suite that has a separate sleeping and sitting area. And maybe it's not as good of a redemption as I could have got, but it's a product I'm really looking for. So that's something we really emphasize, is don't feel, the numbers are important. My father was an accountant, so I understand that part, but sometimes don't feel like the rules aren't meant to be bent a little bit, especially if it means you're getting a better flight, a better route, better timing, or a better product.
Mm-hmm. Love it. Cool. And actually, it wasn't in here, but I do want to also say, if you're struggling with cents per point, another strategy that I like to use to calculate value if I'm looking at long haul business class is I just do 10,000 points per hour in the air. I didn't make that up, so I can't take the credit. I did get that from a blogger, but 10,000 points per mile in the air for business class tends to be a really good test of that's pretty much the most that I will pay. Meaning from the East Coast to Europe, I don't really want to be paying more than 70,000 or 80,000 if it's Eastern Europe. And then to Asia, that's why I'm okay paying 90 or 100,000 points. And this is one way, each way per person for those, because those flights are over 10 hours. So that's another strategy too that you can use if you're just struggling to figure out when to use your points and when to save them. Cool. So fixed versus dynamic award charts. Actually, Tom, I think you had this one in the Redemption Multipliers course, so I'll let you kind of take this one too.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's essentially two main ways that you can find awards. So the first one is fixed. So what is fixed award pricing? It's what it sounds like. It means like Air Canada is a good example of this, where they'll say, hey, from the East Coast, the Northeast US to Europe in business class on any partner is going to be 60K, and it's fixed. It doesn't matter what time of year it is. It doesn't matter what two cities you're going to, as long as it's within those regions. So it's just a fixed chart, and you know how much it's going to cost before you even go and find it. The other side is dynamic. So there's programs like Air Canada, for example, that can drive you crazy, because some days you look and a flight is 50K, some days it's 700K. And they both have pros and cons to them as well. And then we can kind of go into, I forget if we have a slide after this that goes into saver space, or you want me to go into saver space now?
You can talk a little bit about it now. Yeah.
Yeah. So saver space is, and it can be both fixed or dynamic, but essentially airlines will keep a bucket of seats that they call saver space, and it's their cheapest price, and they're usually something you're going to book very, very early on when it's first released, or right before the flight, take kind of last minute. For example, I talked about Air France's crazy pricing. 50K is their saver space, and you can find that, and that's a really, really screaming deal between the US and Europe. And then it's dynamic after the saver seats sell out, so it'll kind of go all over the place. So knowing when and how to find that saver space is something we cover, and that's huge for finding the best deals with some of these dynamic programs that are a little more challenging versus fixed ones. A lot of times that's easier because certain region to certain region, I can predict this is going to be the pricing. But even some of the fixed airlines will have a fixed regular price and a fixed saver price, like Singapore, for example, that they have a regular price and a saver price. They're always the same, but you obviously want to get the saver ones and save some of those points.
Yeah. Awesome.
Somebody just commented and said saver award from United.
Yep. Yeah.
Exactly.
So 88,000 to go to Europe. That is the lowest price. You will see sometimes 100,000, 200,000 points to go to Europe. That's because the saver price sold out. So then they resort to their next highest price. They're kind of a combination of fixed and dynamic, I would say, because they have a fixed floor, but then it does go up in kind of bands above that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why sometimes with like a program like United, and we're talking business class. I just saw a question about economy versus business, but we were talking about business in general. That's why sometimes you look at, I don't know, Boston to Frankfurt booking through United, it's 250K one day. The very next day, it's 88K, and it's because that saver space is still available on this date, but not this date.
And if they're wondering too about the 10K per hour in the sky rule for business, for economy, you could just cut that in half and you could do like 5K per hour in the sky. I think that makes enough sense for economy.
That's awesome. Holly just said she scored some American Saver space today. I like pulling up these victory comments. 4 seats nonstop roam to my hometown for my family and for kids. 54,000 per seat.
Nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah, way to go, Holly.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah, American points can actually be pretty valuable. I did see some comments around about, I have points stranded here. I have points stranded there. What do I do with them? For people that have Capital One points, because I saw this on a couple comments, those are not stranded. Capital One actually is a currency that is flexible. They do have transfer partners, so you can do these same redemptions with Capital One points too. They just have slightly different transfer partners than Chase and Amex do, but those are still valuable points. They're not ones that we talk about because we like Chase and Amex better, but they're probably like number 3 or number 4 on the list. So don't think that those are like stuck stranded points.
Here's a combination of not
yeah,
stuck
that's
and
what I
stranded.
saw.
Right. So Delta Amex cards with points. I had that too, Karen. Don't feel badly. I thought I was all that and fancy back in the day. And then she does have points on Capital One as well.
Yeah, those Delta points are stranded, and Delta is they're so dynamic. They're like, I think, the epitome of a dynamic award chart. Well, they will just try and charge you 3 million points or something for a flight, and they're kind of out of control. That's why we don't love them. But those points can definitely be used, and sometimes domestic hops, you can get like 8,000 points to go, to Chicago or something. And that honestly is just as good of a use for them as anything else. So you will find ways to use them.
Yeah, Delta is tough. I know at our last year in Denver at our conference, I shared my first point redemption when I had no idea what I was doing many, many years ago. And it was Delta miles because Boston is a hub for Delta. And I went down to like Tampa to see my parents. And I spent the same amount I should have spent on like business class to Europe. Instead, I spent it on a domestic flight. So definitely don't feel bad if you struggle at first to figure out what you're doing.
It's always going to have a sting to that one, huh?
I'll never forget Delta. No.
Right.
I know we're so mean to Delta in this group. But
well, they deserve it.
They kind of asked for it.
If Pete Buttigieg is giving them a hard time, we can too.
It's true. My first redemptions were actually on Southwest. For years, I just got a Chase Sapphire card and transferred points to Southwest to fly to Jamaica. That was every year I'd get a free trip to Jamaica thanks to Chase. I was on a very low budget. I was a broke 20-something. I barely had the credit score to get a Sapphire card. Very low spend. I think I was spending less than $1,000 a month. So if that's you, like, you could still play this game. So that's how I got started. All righty. Airline routing. I'm going to take this one because I love to talk about airline routing. I'm such a nerd about this stuff. I think this is airline routing is something that's just not talked about enough. Any other like groups or programs or blogs, I feel like this is the big black hole that they're missing, where people will be like, I'm doing all these searches. I understand how to use the tools out there. I understand how to navigate like Air France and Air Canada's websites, but I'm still not finding anything. Why? And it's because they just kind of lack that understanding of basic airline routing. And that's okay. You don't have to you don't learn this in school. Like if you don't learn it here, I don't know where else you're going to learn it. So it's okay that you don't know that right now, but I swear understanding this piece is what's going to help all of your award searches just go so much smoother. So I have done a whole hour presentation on this in the past. I'm going to try and bring it down to like a 5-minute. But what you need to know is that most airlines that are not like low cost carriers, I'm talking your big national carriers like American, Delta, United, they operate with a hub and spoke model. And that means that they have a hub where they're like have their central operations, and then they fly people to different cities that we'd consider like the spoke from that hub as if it were like a wheel. And that's why you're probably, last time you flew on Delta, did you go through Atlanta? Probably. Or if you're on the West Coast, you probably went through Salt Lake City or Seattle. That's because those are their hubs, and you're always going to be connected through their hubs because that's literally how they do their planes. Like you're probably not going to get a flight from Nashville to like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of like a smaller city, like even like Nashville to St. Louis. Like I'm not getting there direct unless it's on a point-to-point airline. I'm not going to get there direct on that flight on like on an American or United, et cetera, without having to stop in Dallas or stop in Chicago or stop in one of their hubs or Atlanta. But then we have, contrary to that, we have point-to-point. So this is where like Southwest Airlines comes in. This is where like budget low cost carriers, which is the technical name for Spirit, Frontier, Allegiant, all of them, they operate on a point-to-point model. So they take smaller markets and connect them based on basically supply and demand, like where they think their customers are missing out. If only the legacy carriers are there, they kind of fill in the gap for you. That's why I fly Southwest a lot, because Nashville is a secondary city. We're not a hub for AA, United, or Delta. We're not a hub for any of them. We're now a hub for Southwest, and it's taken a while, but that's why I have to fly Southwest, because unless I want to connect in Atlanta, Houston, or Chicago every time I fly, or Dallas for American, unless I want to connect in those cities every time I fly, like I need another option if I want to go nonstop anywhere. And that's where Southwest comes in. So when you're doing your searches, you might be trying to search from Nashville. And let's say I want to go to Venice. In Italy, like Venice is a secondary city in Italy. It's not Rome. It's not the big hub. Nashville is not a major city in the US. It's like more of a secondary or tertiary city for the US. So if I'm trying to get from a small city to another small city, there's definitely not a nonstop way to do it. There's no airline that would fly that nonstop. I'm going to have to connect in a hub somewhere, and I might have to connect in a hub in the US and then another one in Europe, because I'm also going to a small city in Europe. So I'm probably going to be, if I'm flying on American, I'm probably going to be connecting in JFK, and then I'm probably going to be connecting again in London, because that's their biggest European partner is going to be British Airways. They're probably going to connect me in London and put me on a British Airways flight to Venice. That's how they would do that. Same thing if I want to fly United, they're going to stop me probably in Newark or Washington, D.C. They're going to send me maybe over to somewhere in Germany where like there's a Lufthansa hub, and then get to me from there. So that's why you'll see like just more layovers on certain routes. And it just will help you make better searches, more realistic searches. Like, don't try to get from St. Louis to Florence, okay? Like, it's not, you can do that, but don't expect to do it without probably 2 layovers. At best, you could do it with 1 layover, but if you do it with 1 layover, you have to catch one of those airlines that has a hub somewhere in Europe and that flies direct to St. Louis. And I think there's like one, I think it's just Lufthansa. But anyway, that's kind of why you might be struggling if you're trying to do your searches without really truly understanding this concept, and why maybe when you ask people to find flights for you, if you've ever done my point research service that we have through JGoot, and I've emailed you back and said, hey, I know you want to get there with 1 stop, but it's just not possible. This is why. There is a website that I really, really love, and it's called flightconnections.com. And if you want to just go on flightconnections.com and kind of play around, and that's a great, great way to just understand and learn more about hubs and airlines, and where do each airlines have their hub, who flies direct to my airport from certain continents. So awesome tool. I would honestly, you could just spend hours on that thing just clicking around. But yeah, kind of the takeaways from here is that the budget carriers or smaller airlines are the ones who use the point-to-point model. So in Europe, that'd be like Ryanair, Wizz Air, like some of those. Here, it's definitely Southwest. And then the true Southwest isn't really a low-cost carrier, but the low-cost carriers do have the same model. And then the hub and spoke are going to be your big airlines, your national carriers, Air Canada, Air France, Aeromexico, Delta, AA, United. They use the big like hub and spoke model. And then that's just kind of what I want you to kind of get out of this. And where that kind of leads into is the positioning flight conversation. And this is why we talk so much about positioning flights. I think we actually did an entire live stream just on like the importance of airline routing and positioning before. But I really want to hit it home. This is why we talk about it. Because if you are on one of those routes and you can't get direct to where you're trying to go, and let's say you're on Air France and you're searching Nashville to Paris, there is no Nashville to Paris. It's going to try to connect you to a city that Air France actually flies out of. And they're going to do it with Delta because Delta is their partner. They're in the same alliance. So you're stuck with only Delta routes out of Nashville. And out of Nashville, if you're going east, you're pretty much only going to JFK or Atlanta. Those are your choices on Delta. So they're going to connect you in Atlanta or JFK, and then they're going to get you on an Air France flight, which is fine, but they're going to charge you way more for that Delta leg of the flight. And if you just search the JFK to Paris or the Atlanta to Paris, you're going to get potentially a saver rate or a much better rate. And then I can get myself to New York. I could definitely get myself to Atlanta. I could probably drive to Atlanta. So that's just like how important positioning is. And if you're really struggling, try just looking at the main part of the flight, just like the big chunk, and then worry about getting yourself to that airport separately. And yeah, so here's flight connections up on the screen here too. Thank you, Mia, for putting up that little banner, but we have it in the slide as well. Definitely an awesome tool. And then some tips for your positioning flight to make sure that you don't, miss your connecting flight, etc. I like to position the night before. I get a lot of pushback when I suggest this. People say, well, that just adds money to my trip. Well, you're saving a lot of money on your trip. So you got to think of it in that context. But also I save any like free hotel nights that I collect through like having the Hyatt credit card. I get like category 1 through 4 free nights sometimes. I use those only for positioning. Those are my positioning hotels. So I never pay for my positioning hotels. I use my Hyatt free nights or I use points because those little airport hotels, especially like the little Hyatt place near the airport, it's usually a lower category. It's usually cheap. You usually can spend 10, 12,000 points for the one night or use a category 1 through 4 certificate. Like it's really easy to do with those airport properties. So I think you actually can manage to pull this off where your positioning is free. And then the added expense of getting to the flight to the airport you need to get to, that's not an added expense. That is, you're saving money by positioning. So think about that as part of like your overall flight cost.
And peace of mind, Stephanie.
Oh yeah.
And Christopher's here. I do love that advice too. I agree. It really is a peace of mind of just like you're already there. All you do is get up and you go right to the airport. There's something to be said for that. You never know what's going to happen. So I'm here for that.
Yeah, my favorite is the night before. If you're not going to do the night before, the buffer I usually tell people is 5 hours. I like to have a 5-hour buffer. That gives me like 3 hours for delays and then an extra 2 hours to do like the rechecking of bags. I don't check bags, but I know a lot of people do. When you position, you do have to recheck your own bags. So you need to allow time for that. And you got to go back through security, et cetera. Sometimes depends on
you do sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. So you just, the 5-hour time frame is a really good buffer. I feel like, I have no data to back this up, by the way, but I feel like 3 hours, if it's beyond 3 hours, they're probably canceling the flight at that point. Like delays that go longer than 3 hours are probably just not going to happen. Or that's at the point where I'm looking at other flights, right? So and like I said, I don't have data to back that up, so please don't quote me. But in my mind, 3 hours is a long enough time to account for delays. If it's more delayed than that, I'm looking at plan B and probably just getting on a different plane and overpaying and worrying about insurance later just because I want to get to my destination.
It's a good contingency. I like that. And that is based on your experience.
Yes. And always keep in mind, 75% of flights worldwide are on time. 75%. I like to gamble. I'm a gambling gal. Mm-hmm. I like the odds of 75%. And I take those odds every time.
Sandy, we know you. I need a full course on how to pack carry-on only. But, when you start traveling the Jay Goot way, you just can't think of any other way to and somebody else. How do you not check bags? Just hang out with the Jay Goot folks and you will learn. And everybody always looks so cute in their pictures. So not to worry if you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to have cute things to wear. Trust me.
Oh, are you kidding me? I have to look cute when I travel.
Absolutely. And it's doable.
Yep. I travel with a backpack, which is extreme. It's a big backpack. It's like an Osprey bag, but which is very extreme. I don't expect other people to do that, but I learned everything about packing from Katie, who is here. Well, I don't know if she's here today. I think she's in Europe right now, so she's probably sleeping. But she taught me everything I know.
Compression cubes were a game changer. Those things totally changed how I pack.
Yes.
Yep. And realizing how many clothes, like at the end of the trip, looking at how many clothes that I packed that I didn't wear, like that was eye-opening to me.
Oh, I've done that before.
I'm overpacking. Like, why? I don't need this much stuff. I just don't.
Yeah. Capsule wardrobes and Katie training. Exactly. Yeah. It is. And you will see those things and just resent whatever that item was that you brought. Like, oh, what did I bring you?
Like this took up space. Yeah, my favorite little story about that is that Mira took the book, the Jagoot book, and she printed like a picture of the front of the book because she didn't want to pack the book everywhere she travels, but she wants to take pictures with the book. So just a piece of paper and she sticks it in her laptop. And I think that's absolutely genius. So
that is so clever. I did not know that.
Yeah, I love it. Anyway, we're going to move on to transfer bonuses.
Speaking of the book, let me pop this in here because I mean, this is where you start. I know we are making, that graph you had earlier of all the lines and the dots. Like, I think that's how a lot of people's brains feel. I feel you on that. It's all that. Do you feel like that right now?
But you can GIF or the meme of the guy from Always Sunny in Philadelphia with the board behind him.
With the board, and he's like,
that's it.
That's it. But go to jagoot.com/book, speaking of which, and you can download it. We have an audiobook, all of that. It is definitely something you want to get. This is the best way to get started. And the information about the calculator is in that as well.
Yes. All right, cool. We're going to move on to transfer bonuses. I'll take this one too, because I recorded some fun content on this. And so what are transfer bonuses? Transfer bonuses are my absolute favorite thing to leverage. And this is what makes this game really, really fun. So when we talk about like multiplying your redemptions, this is the start of that. We're not just transferring our points and booking a saver rate. That's like the first level of the, the stack. The next level of the stack is stacking on a transfer bonus on top of that. So transfer bonuses are extra points you get from your bank. Sometimes the airline offers it. Sometimes it's the bank. It depends on the promo. But they will award you additional points when you move your points from a bank to a specific airline. So for instance, right now, Capital One has one to Air France, 20%. And Amex has one to British Airways, 30%. So what they're basically doing is they're just giving you 30% more points when you transfer to British Airways. So that makes your points a lot more valuable because now you're getting extra free points. It's kind of like having a 401k match from your company. Like you're getting like free money, really.
I love Anthony's comment. We're talking stacks on stacks here.
Stacks on stacks on stacks.
We love that.
Yeah. So then we have Built, and I'm not saying to go out and get a Built card. Actually, if you want to learn more about Built, if you're in the vault, we did a whole live stream on Built, and you could watch it in the vault. So, or you could even just buy that one training if you want, if you're not in the vault. If you want to learn more about the Built card, I'm not saying to go out and get it necessarily. I only want to get it if it's right for you, and that training will help you decide if it's right for you. But for those who do have the Built card, they do this really awesome thing where about 3 to 4 times a year, it's about quarterly, they will do a 100% transfer bonus to an airline, and it'll be one day only. So it's like a very limited time window that you have to take advantage of this. And then sometimes you can get up to 150% for your bonus, depending on your status level with Built. They have like a whole status program thing. So if you can get 150% bonus, I mean, that means 100,000 points now becomes 250,000 points. That's insane. Unheard of. Like, could you just imagine getting 2.5 times the Emirates first class? Like, it's insane. And they've historically had transfer bonuses to Air France. They've done the most. They did one to Emirates. They've done one to Hawaiian. They did Alaska. It was capped not quite as high as 150. It was capped a little lower, but still they did one to Alaska. They just did Virgin Atlantic this month, September 1st. And then they've had one to Air Canada. I took advantage of the Air Canada one, and I ended up coupling that with just what I know about searching for award space and my knowledge of the Air Canada pricing tiers, like their fixed pricing that they have for their partners, and my understanding of airline routing by knowing that Singapore offers a route to Japan that doesn't actually touch Singapore. And I stalked that LAX to Tokyo flight for months to recognize patterns of how often they release seats on this flight. And I checked every day. And I had transferred 66,000 built points to Air Canada that became 150,000 points with the bonus that they had. And with that 150,000 points, I was finally able to book one of those Singapore flights to Japan in business class on one of the best products in the world. So it only took 66,000 points for 2 people one way.
You are relentless. That's what I was giggling about. I'm just listening to you. I'm like, go off, Steph. Like, I love that.
I mean, that's a lot. That's insane. Like, I don't expect everyone here to like be doing that. But I mean, for the people who come back and say like, oh, what am I learning in these live streams? You just learned a lot right there. Like you learned checking every day, learning the routes that these airlines fly, understanding the award charts that you're transferring to, a good knowledge of all those 3 things. That's how you get it done.
Love it. I don't know if you saw this comment. Brooke also learned how to stock these routes from you, and it is next level ninja stuff. Absolutely.
It is. It's pretty crazy. How to find these transfer bonuses. Okay, this part's pretty easy, actually. You can just find them on your bank website. So if you log into Amex, you log into Chase, you go to transfer points. They usually have like a rewards dashboard with a button that says transfer points. It'll be under like redeem my points, and there'll be a transfer to travel partners like link. If you go under there, they always list their promotions. Sometimes they put them right at the top or they highlight them. They make it pretty easy. They want you to take advantage of this. So they're going to make sure you know. And also if you're subscribed to any like blogs and things, the bloggers are always on it real quick and they'll announce when there's transfer bonuses. But yeah, you can find them right in your bank. And then sometimes airlines offer them, not through the bank. Avianca is known for doing this. They will do like a 15% bonus when you transfer from Amex, but it's not offered by Amex. It's offered by Avianca Life Miles. So you'll see your points on the Avianca side after you transfer. They'll show up in your Avianca account. So to know about those, you just have to subscribe to all the airlines' mailing lists. And you should, if you're at this point in the game, you should have frequent flyer accounts with every airline that you can transfer to. With the cards that are in your wallet. And you should be signed up to get emails from every single one of those airlines so that you can see when this is happening.
Great point.
Yeah.
Didn't cost you anything, folks. Just,
No, it's free. Just sign up for a frequent flyer account, subscribe to their emails. All right. I'm going to fill up my water bottle and let Tom take it away for understanding aircraft.
Yeah. This is one of those pieces that's just like understanding the routes, is being able to tell from the aircraft what kind of experience you're going to have, because there's often a big difference between anyone that's flown like first class. I made that joke about Boston to Tampa earlier, but the first class on Boston to Tampa is not like the first class from New York to Dubai. There's a slight difference between the 2 products. And so understanding aircraft can really help you figure out, if you're like me and you go after aspirational seats and you're like, hey, I want to fly this particular cabin, or even if you're more flexible, but you're like, hey, I want to have a really luxurious experience. I want to make sure I'm in a lie flat bed. And part of that is wide body versus narrow body. And there's a few exceptions to this we'll talk about too. But paying attention to that when you're redeeming points is critical, and because you understand what you're getting. A lot of people, especially when they'll first join or first get into this, they end up spending points on business class in Europe. If you've ever been on business class in Europe, it's a step down from first class in the US. It's an economy seat, and they'll just put seat belts over the middle seat. And it's literally the same seat people sit in economy. And so understanding when something's a narrow body versus a wide body is the difference between wasting money on an upgrade that really isn't that meaningful. And then, we'll talk about some of these aspirational products too, like Etihad has the apartment or the residence where you have a separate sitting area, a separate sleeping area. You have your own private shower in some places, or you have a shared shower for other first class guests. Emirates is like that. They have a few first class products that are just top of the line, and they're things where you'll want to specifically target that. So you look at these wide body, like an A380 is where the whole plane is 2 levels. 747 has the hump in the front, so it has the second floor just in the front of the plane. Or looking at something like a 777, which is probably one of my favorite planes. It's a wide body plane, so airlines are putting their best products on there because they're flying these on really popular, really competitive routes. This is what you're seeing from like New York to Paris or LA to Tokyo, like Stephanie had mentioned, and these are going to be airlines putting their best foot forward to show you what they have. So even American, United, Delta, sometimes their domestic products are a little lackluster. If you get on Delta, AA, United flying from a US city to a major Asian city, it's lie flat seats, champagne, much better catering, and all that. So knowing what type of aircraft it is unlocks all that. And then I forget if we have a second slide for the aircraft types. We don't, but yeah, so that's critical. Understanding if something's an Embraer, if something's a 737 MAX 8, like Stephanie said, those aren't going to be super luxurious. They're going to be the ones you fly more often than not, probably. I think I probably fly narrow bodies way more than I fly the wide bodies. But when you're looking for awards and you want like the lie flat seats, the champagne, and all that, figuring out which aircraft types is critical to unlocking that.
Cool. Thanks, Tom. Mia, were there any questions that you wanted us to highlight before we kind of move on to the last section here?
No, let's get through that, and then I'll just pop through a bunch. I have starred a few if you want to look through it. Well, if whoever's not talking, you'll see it up there in the right-hand corner. You'll see what I've pulled up there, but I know our experts have been answering things too, so let's keep going.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, we can answer a bunch at the end too. So award search tools. So this is kind of where you take all the knowledge of all those things we just talked about, your airline routes, your positioning, you understand where the airlines fly, you know what cities you're going to be searching. And now you're like, okay, what do I do next? So award search tools are that they're a tool. They are not supposed to be the only thing that you use to find award space. We also want people to just go on these airline websites and search, because once you know the routes that they fly and the aircraft that they fly, it should be much easier to just do regular searches. But if you're getting stuck, or if you want to search multiple cities or entire continents at once because you really understand the value of positioning and you're like, hey, I can go anywhere in the US to fly out, I want to search the whole country. That's where some of these tools come into play, because they will let you do just like mass searching of multiple cities all at once. So there's two different types of tools. There are what we call cached tools, and then there's live search tools. Cached tools, what they do, and a couple examples of these are like seats.aero, points.yeah, Rome.travel. I'm sure a lot of people in the audience have maybe heard of at least one of those. When you use those tools, what they basically do is they run millions of searches on airline websites, and they pull all that data in and they store it kind of on a centralized like server. Sorry for the IT people in the audience. I am not techie enough to truly understand how like APIs work, so forgive me if I explain it a little weird, but this is my understanding, is they kind of take it all and they kind of store it on a server. And then when you run a search, you're not actually running a search on the airline's website. You're running it against the information that they have stored on that server. So if you want to say, I want to go from anywhere in the US to anywhere in Europe, you're looking at data that they pulled. The data that they pulled could have been pulled an hour ago, could have been pulled a day ago, could have been pulled 3 days ago. So sometimes that data could be out of date. So these cached tools might have some issues with accuracy, which is why you always want to verify everything you find on a tool with the actual airline website. And then on the flip side of that, we have live search tools, which literally will just go and search every airline website in real time when you do your search with them. But sometimes it takes like up to 2 minutes for them to turn those results back to you, because They're doing it live, so it takes a while. So those searches are a little bit slower, but much more accurate. So they both have kind of their times when they're really valuable to use. For the cache tools, so this is basically if you want to search lots of destinations at one time, whole continents at one time, that's what the cache tools are best at. And then for the live tools, point.me is probably the most famous one. These are best when you have specific dates and specific locations, because you can't search multiple cities with them. You can only do like one city to one city and on one date. So if you have specific dates, specific places you have to fly to and from, or there's a specific airline route you are looking for exactly, that's where the live tools are very valuable. And that's where I would use them. So a cool little tip to use point.me, you can actually use it for free. And you could do that if you have an Amex card, then you can use point.me for free through Amex. And then if you want to sign up for a Built subscription, and it's not subscription, their reward program, you don't have to be a card holder with Built to sign up for an account with them. You could just sign up for like a rewards account with them, and you can use point.me for free within the Built app. So those are two ways that you can actually get some free tools. The other ones, the cached ones, are not free, but a lot of them have like free trial periods, and you can kind of test them out first before spending any money. Tom, you have anything there that you wanted to add about the tools?
No, I think you covered a lot, but yeah, I mean, the big thing is, and why we stress learning the fundamentals. It's like at least when I went to school, in math class, they wouldn't let us use calculators because they said you need to know how to do this on your own, even though in the real world you'll have a calculator. So like you need to understand how to do this. Now, I don't know if I've ever needed algebra 3 yet in my life, but so maybe not the best analogy, but this is the same way. It's, get to know the fundamentals first, and then you can use the tools, and they'll save you a ton of time. I use seats.arrow. They're all, great tools, but there's sometimes you get stuff that's wrong, or the seats don't exist anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But knowing how to do it and then leveraging the tools to save you some time and some headache is great. But if just going straight to the tools and trying to find stuff is not a recipe for success. So that's one of the reasons that Stephanie and I especially really stress learning the fundamentals, so that you don't end up just relying on tools and get yourself in a place where you're paying too much or you're not getting the right flights.
Yep, exactly that. And we definitely go through a lot of information, both in the classes we teach in the lounge and in a fun new course that we're going to talk about at the end of this, that goes into much more detail on what you should be searching and how you should be searching, so that you're not just using a tool without understanding its purpose. And you should know exactly what part of the search process you're replacing with a tool, which is fine. I think tools are great. They really help cut back on the time, but it's really, really important to understand the whys behind it and when you're using it and how, so that it doesn't become like a handicap and becomes actually a tool. All right, understanding alliances. So this is super important too. It definitely helps with the tools. Like if you're going to use those search tools, understanding alliances is going to help you a lot. We have the transfer partner matrix here, and this we have it linked here. You can actually just Google transfer partner matrix too if you want to save it on your desktop. And basically, this kind of goes through all the airlines that are part of each alliance, so that when you're doing your searches, if you are trying to find flights to a certain continent and there are certain airlines you have in mind, you can actually find those airlines' flights through their partners. So if you're trying to find a Singapore flight because you're going to Southeast Asia, you should be able to book that on Air Canada because they're partners. Now, that's probably not the greatest example because they're a little stingy with the award space that they make available to Air Canada. So there might not be times where you're seeing their flights actually available, but just so that you know, like this is how you can determine where to do your searches based on which airlines fly to the place that you're trying to get to. And if you're like, I don't know who flies to where I'm trying to get to, that's where airline routing and flightconnections.com comes into play. That's where you get to see, okay, who flies to this part of the world I'm trying to get to, what alliance are they in, and that's how I'm going to decide where I'm going to do my searches. So Tom, did you want to add anything to the transfer partner matrix bit?
Yeah, and this is where you get a lot of these deals. So like Air Canada is also one of my favorite ones for the same reasons as you. But there are times where you look at what Singapore charges for a Singapore Airlines flight and then what Air Canada charges for that same Singapore Airlines flight, and it's like 30,000 points less each way per person to book that same exact flight through a different program. So this is really where, and we had talked about fixed and dynamic award charts, taking advantage of these award charts is really how you get this exponential value. It's how you go from a 5-cent redemption to a 10-cent redemption on the same exact flight, same exact dates, but understanding which partners have better award charts for different regions, which ones are going to have a transfer bonus, and things like that. So kind of putting all this together is really how you get these multipliers versus just redeeming everything for 1 cent per point through Amex or Chase's portal.
Yeah, I love it. I call it price shopping. I make this analogy all the time on my checkpoints in the lounge, where I say it's like buying a TV. You're going to check Best Buy, you're going to check Target, you're going to check Walmart, all for that same TV. Who's selling it the cheapest? You could do that with flights. If I have a Singapore flight I really want to fly, can I get it cheaper on Air Canada? Can I get it cheaper on Avianca Life Miles? Can I get it cheaper on Singapore themselves? Like, because these are all airlines that I can transfer to. For instance, if I have Amex points, and this is how I would determine that.
This is also like the It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia chart. This thing here.
Yeah, it's a lot. This is one of those things. Like, yeah, I'm giving everybody watching this homework. Like, your homework, everyone, is like, dig into this chart, dig into flightconnections.com, make frequent flyer accounts on every airline that you can transfer to, and that's your homework. So.
And this is available for, I think, 48 hours. Somebody correct me on that. And then after that, it's going into the vault as well. What were you going to say?
Just today. I think they're.
Is it just today?
Midnight today.
Okay.
Yeah. Going into the vault. Yep.
I was going to say, this is one of the biggest hurdles when people first start looking into award redemptions, and they'll be like, I want to go from Dallas to Honolulu. And I'll be like, all right, let's look at Cathay Pacific. And they're like, no, I don't want to go to Hong Kong. And it's like, no, Cathay Pacific, it's in one world. They're going to have better redemptions for those American Airlines flights from Dallas to Honolulu. And this is one of the things that once it clicks, you just get it and it opens up a whole new world. But at first you're like, if I want to go to Singapore, why am I doing Air Canada? And this kind of like lays it all out, and it kind of clicks, and you can understand why you're using these programs to book these other flights. Otherwise, like, talking to people, it doesn't make sense. You're like, how did Cathay Pacific come into this conversation? And this is how, knowing these alliances and knowing the different award charts within the alliances. This is one of the big keys to unlocking all that.
Yeah, this is huge. So
the brain trust at Jay Good is off the chain, just with these two, y'all. So okay.
We're just so nerdy.
I love it.
And I like clearing this up too, because, oh my gosh, I get this question like 3 times a day at least, where people say, I can't do a search on XYZ airline website because I don't have points in my account. That's a myth. You don't need points in your account to search with anyone, except there's one airline that's an exception, but they're not even one you can transfer to. I think it's Lufthansa. But like any other airline, you don't need points in your account to do a search. But usually that search is a separate like checkbox or a tab, or sometimes a separate page to specifically search for points and not for cash. So you do have to locate that checkbox or tab or whatever it may be to do your searches. And if you can't find it, try logging into your frequent flyer account, because sometimes it's not even visible until you're logged into your account. And that's why you need frequent flyer accounts with all these airlines. But just making sure everybody knows, you can search on any airline website without having points in your account. You do not have to transfer points to do a search. Cool.